Hello and welcome. It is Vintage Super League time. I'm Randy Bueller, joined today by Luis Scott Vargas for some pregame action. How you doing, Luis?
I'm doing pretty well. My match hasn't happened yet, so I still got to sweat that. But other than that, things are going great.
Cool. Yeah, you've got probably the biggest match today, right?
In terms of determining final standings, yes, more for Chris than for me because he's fighting for a playoff spot. Of
Right.
course, if I do win, I'm in good shape to get first or at the very least second. But Chris's life is on the line a little more than me.
Little bit. I mean, I've got the same record Chris does, and it doesn't feel like the highest stakes match I've ever played just because there's a two-game gap. Like we've
Right,
both got kind of a loss to give. Basically, Rich or Steve has to 2-0, and Chris or I has to 0-2. Then we get a tiebreaker.
right.
So Chris, like me, has clinched a tie for the playoffs. Would feel a lot better to win. And for me, though, the big stakes are the one seed, and they're a win over you, and suddenly he's tied with you. Ifro loses, suddenly we could have a four-way tie for the one seed by the end of today.
Yeah, definitely.
And the one seed, just to remind everybody how the playoffs actually work. If you win the regular season of Vintage Super League, you get a bye all the way through to the finals. So the playoffs will see number 3 play number 4. The winner of that will play number 2, and the winner of that plays number 1. So those regular season seedings, they're a big deal. I mean, third versus fourth, basically meaningless, but getting the 2 seed or the 1 seed is a very big deal.
Yeah, buy into the finals is no joke.
Yeah. I mean, you had to earn it last year. I know you've wound up, tied for the regular season title last year, but lost the tiebreaker game?
Yeah, and then made it back to the finals where Steve then defeated me.
We'll see how
So,
this plays out. Yeah, I feel the standings do kind of feel like the haves and the haves not right, have nots right now with that gap in the middle.
yeah, this is kind of the opposite of last year. Last year, it was all everyone was clustered. Steve and I were ahead. I mean, we did have end up playing out
True.
for the one seed, but there was potentially going into the last week of the tournament four different ways to hit, or a bunch of different ways to hit a complete different top four or bottom one. And this time, it's not quite as jumbled up. There's some people who are in contention for the bottom, people in contention for the top, but it's not. We're not looking at eight-way ties.
Yeah, no, the four of us at the top have all clinched not last and have all clinched at least a tie. But then, yeah, it's the race at the bottom that I think is the big one. 6 different people could still finish last,
Yeah.
and none of them want to. And it feels like we could get some tiebreaker games one way or the other.
Yeah, we've got I'm sure pretty good odds of that happening.
Now, the biggest game on the bottom, I mean, I think your match against Chris, I think, is the biggest game on the top this week, just because it's the only match featuring 2 people in the top 4. Dave Williams versus Rich Shea. That's the first match we're going to have up. That is huge if Dave wants to get out of the cellar.
Yeah, that's a big match because we've got two of the people who are in contention, and Dave. I mean, Dave is it needs to start fighting for his life at this point.
Yeah, is it? I mean, it's not mathematically a must win because in theory he can lose
Right.
this game, win next week, and have somebody 0-2 from the 3-way tie above him. But it sure feels like a must win.
Yeah, he's gonna be. I mean, when you're hoping for someone to 0-2 and then you get a tiebreaker, that does not sound like the spot you want to be in. So, I think Dave is definitely sweating his match.
Do you have much experience with the bug still deck that he's playing?
Not that specific build. I played some with different Landstill decks, and the funny thing is, one of the reasons I didn't play Landstill this time, I actually considered it, was I didn't think that a mana base with Wasteland and Mishra's Factory and Library of Alexandria was all that great.
Mm.
Dave's playing that mana base, but he's also playing 4 colors instead of 2, or 3 colors. Sorry, 3 colors instead of 2. Like he it was just so painful watching him draw the 4th Mishra's Factory when he had Abrupt Decay in his hand, but
Yep.
when you put cards like Abrupt Decay, Mana Drain, and then 7 to 8 colorless lands in your deck, you're relying on Deathrite Shaman pretty heavily.
Yes. Yeah, and I let those Death Rides live longer than I should have last week, but he still couldn't get the colored mana to work.
Right, but on the plus side for Dave, I mean, he's playing against Oath this time, and he's got a lot of ways to fight Oath, including just millions of Abrupt Decays in his main deck.
And his sum total of his main deck creatures is the 4 Death Ray Shamans. I mean, that was the thing that had me particularly confused last week. Is I couldn't stitch together this like mental deck list of what he must be running, and so I didn't realize, oh, the Deathrite Shaman is literally the only target for Dismember. So I should have been killing it on the spot, but I just didn't quite understand what's up. I mean, against an Oath deck, it feels like he can just attack with Mistress Factory and never play a creature, force Rich to come up with the Forbidden Orchard half of the combo too, and then he's still got Abrupt Decay.
Yeah, and Dave does, if he really wants to, he can do stuff like side an Engineered Plague named Spirit, and then it turns off Forbidden Orchard. I haven't seen that interaction in a while, but that was a relevant one back when people played those cards. So
I did not think of that. I figured the Engineered Plagues were for me, because I mean, I'm sure he put me on possibly running back the Merfolk list.
Right. Yeah, I do think his first priority was Merfolk, naming Merfolk, but naming Spirit is not the worst play you can make.
No, that sounds actively good enough to bring him in anyway.
Yeah, though Rich does have a pretty robust show and tell package. He's got 3 Gristlebrand in his deck and lots of show and tells just because, I don't know, Kai and I had the same thought when we played Oath last time. The sideboard cards against Oath are so powerful that you really can't just be on Oath after board.
Yeah, how close is Rich's list to the one that you and Kai were running before?
Not that close. I mean, close in the sense that they're both playing Oaths, so there's like some amount of infrastructure that has to go with that. But Rich has like Time Vault and Key. We didn't have that. We had Omniscience, and Rich does not have that. We had Beside You, which, I'm surprised he didn't actually play any copies at all, because that was one of the best cards in the deck. That was one of the reasons we played the deck, was that Beside You against the counter magic decks, especially after board, is just very, very hard to stop. And that's definitely how I won some of my games, was casting uncounterable show and tells or uncounterable dig through times. So having access to that even in like a normal Oath deck seems like a pretty good plan.
Were you happy with the Omniscience? I mean, that felt like the sort of lunatic fringe of the spectrum of Oath decks, and I don't know how comfortable you were out there.
Well, we went 5-1 combined, so I think a lot of that was choosing a deck that to be good against the decks that we thought we were going to play. We thought we were going to play Mentor and Workshops, and the 6 decks we played were 4 Mentor decks, 2 Workshop decks. So one of the Mentor decks overlapped, but yes, that. So we called that one, and Oath was good against that. The actual card Omniscience, I honestly think it's more fun than good. It was sweet. I wouldn't be surprised if something closer to Rich's list ends up being what you want to do, though I really don't like the Time Vault Key package right now. I think it just opens you up to being vulnerable to cards like Null Rod and Ancient Grudge that are just good cards anyway. But
interesting. It's not even worth having in there.
It's not terrible. I mean, there are definitely matchups where you don't mind having the ability to just, 2-card combo kill someone. But once you've got a Gristlebrand in play, I don't think it's necessary. I think you win enough of the games where you have Gristlebrand in play that you don't really need this secondary combo. And if you can assemble a 2-card combo, just show and tell Gristlebrand or Oath of Druid's Forbidden Orchard are both good combos.
Right.
Having a deck that gets hosed by these cards that are very good, and just in general, cards that the Workshop decks also tend to play. I don't know. I don't love playing decks that are soft to Null Rod right now. I just think Null Rod's a effective card that has a really low opportunity cost. So, I mean, you're playing a bunch of them yourself.
Yes. It's definitely decks you can play in Vintage where you're just like messing with people's ability to cast spells, messing with their ability to tap artifacts. It's a powerful strategy. Not the most interactive, maybe not the most fun, but definitely powerful.
Well, I mean, the deck that I played against you with the Vintage Champs, the Delver deck that I've been playing for a while, had a Null Rod in the main and 1 on the board. And even a blue deck, if you're just playing 2 to 3 Moxes and a Lotus, you can play Null Rod, because the decks it's good against, it's like a 10 out of 10. It's right. I mean, maybe Doomsday is a good example of a deck where it's not game over, but it's still pretty good. But like the Belcher deck, it's the best possible card. Actually, Tom Martell was asking me before, we had submitted deck list. He's like, if you had to board 1 card against Belcher, what would it be? And I was just like, Null Rod. He's like, doesn't it hurt the Doomsday deck? I'm like, yeah, but if you have it in play, they just literally can't win. They can't do a single thing. Their out is like Tolarian Academy, 5 artifacts, Tezzeret attack you with 5/5s. So.
Pretty much. Yeah, no, that all makes sense. Yeah, but I think part of what Rich has got going on with his version of the Oath deck, they've got a Yawgmoth's Will in there. I guess you guys had Dig Through Time instead of the Yawgmoth's Will. Is the other big difference?
That's another, I think, fundamental shift that I'm feeling that Vintage is making here. I've been playing a lot of Vintage recently. The Vintage Super League has just gotten me. I already like Vintage, but the Super League has gotten me completely addicted. Where my routine the week or two before new deck lists are due is to play just all the daily events I can. And I think like one of the weekends I had off, I played the like Friday, Saturday, Sunday daily events, like 2 on
Nice.
Saturday, 1 Friday, 1 Sunday. And my experience right now is that instead of putting the card Yawgmoth's in your deck, you could just play more dig through times. And it's kind of the same wins added with a lot less work and a lot less vulnerability. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying I'm completely right on this. I'm just saying my experience has been that I've been playing less Yawgmoth's and more cards with Delve.
Ah, totally makes sense to me. Now, tell me about your latest deck, because you showed up with kind of a brew.
Right. So what I decided I wanted to play Punishing Fire Grove. So that's kind of like where I started after testing a bunch of different decks.
How do you decide to play Punishing Fire Grove? It's just the
Well,
testing. You just felt like the Delver matchups was so good.
I liked that it was good against Delver, and I really wanted to discard Punishing Fire to Dak Faden and then get Punishing Fire back over and over again.
Yeah, you're gonna look at it. This thing it's cool.
Yeah. One of the things is it's got a lot of Dak Fadens in it. That's another card I think is just really good right now. It's funny because
Only 3 copies of Dak Faden. That's pretty cool.
I initially, I'm playing No Rod myself. I initially thought Dak Faden wasn't a good card, but the more I played with it, the more I like Dak. He just gets you out of mana flood or mana screw. Though I guess if you can cast him, you're not too screwed. But you're also just stealing artifacts and filling your graveyard for Delve or comboing with Punishing Fire, as the case may be. And I was gonna play a more landstill version of this, but then I decided, especially after talking to Kai too, Young Pyromancer is just a better card than a lot of the other cards I was considering.
Okay.
And I really wanted to play Gush. I think Gush is just an amazing draw engine. It costs very little. So I ended up deciding that I could play the 3 Groves in 1 Strip Mine and still play a Gush mana base. I'm just playing slightly more lands than a normal Delver deck or Delver type deck, a Pyromancer deck.
But with 3 Dak Fadens, you can get away with that, right?
Exactly. Ideally, Dak Faden is the card that lets me do that. Whether it's good or not, I don't know. I actually think it's not a great choice for the field I ended up playing, given that I'm playing against I played against a Dredge deck, which I have a whole 2 Grafdigger's Cage. I'm playing against Merfolk, which I actually don't think is terrible, though it's certainly not a Windmill Slam. And I'm playing against Oath with not a ton of Grafdigger's Cages, so I've got some interesting thoughts on a Merfolk and Oath matchup, though. So we'll see where those end up landing.
Yeah, can you tell me anything about the Merfolk matchup? That's the one you've got with Chris in round 2 tonight, right?
I do. True Day Nemesis is the card that I care about the most. I don't care about most of his other cards because even if he gets 2 Lords down, I can still either combine double Punishing Fire or Fire Ice or Pyroblast to kill one, at which point Punishing Fire can start picking off the rest.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is none of the cards in my deck interact with True Day Nemesis, so once that comes out, especially via Cavern, so I can't counter it, I've got to race with Young Pyromancer, which isn't impossible, but it's not easy, especially if he's disrupting me. So I am worried about True Names, but I think I've got. I mean, the card Punishing Fire has to be good against Merfolk.
It has to. No, I totally agree. I definitely think. I mean, it's a guy who's been playing a lot of Merfolk. Cavern for True Name just feels unfair. I mean, if your opponent isn't casting haymakers and just comboing out on turn 2 or 3, that combo of Cavern into True Name just feels like you don't get to interact with me. I'm going to kill you with this. Good luck.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the selling points of Merfolk is that
For sure.
you do have this uncounterable, kind of unstoppable, uninteractable threat if anyone takes too long. If you take too long to win the game, True Name will come get you. There's not very many cards that can get them, minus of course Engineered Plague, which but yeah, I'm a little disappointed I'm not playing as workshops. I really want to try the Simian Spirit Guide technology out. The theory there is that I had a lot of powerful 3-drops already, and a way to accelerate that it does not get hit by any of the Thorn type cards because it's not a Mox, it doesn't get Chalice, doesn't get Sphered. It's a way to have a Dak Faden out early. So I have no idea if it's good. It just seems sweet.
Oh, I saw. I mean, Kai is running Simian Spirit Guides in the Belcher deck this week as well, which looked like a great innovation to me. Like I think he's just taken the Belcher list that Chris and I played in the first set and straight improved it. I actually took that version of it to Friday Night Magic last weekend, and it was great. I mean, the Spirit Guides absolutely belong in the deck. I feel like the deck is just better now than it was a month ago.
Yeah, vintage Friday Night Magic is awesome, by the way.
I've been enjoying it. It's certainly fun.
Yeah, so